When you are writing in a major key, your first chord options include 3 major chords and 3 minor chords. Major chords on the first, fourth, and fifth note of the scale, and minor chords on the second, third, and sixth note or degree. The diminished chord on the seventh degree is ignored because it's unstable. When you write a song in a folk, country, or singer-songwriter style, those 6 chords will be your go-to chords. The songs you write with these chords will have a down-to-earth flavor with a relatively low amount of tension and release. You can also include 4 or 5 note variations of these chords to add some extra color. If you remain within the same key, by only adding notes from the original major scale, all chords will sound like one family. They all go together. The first place to create tension resolution is in a 5-1 progression. In the key of C major, that holds the scale notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, this would be the chord sequence G major to C major, G being the chord that is built on the 5th note of the scale, and C being the tonic chord. If you were to color these chords to 4-note chords using tertiary harmony, you would end up with a G7 to C major 7th. Now this 5-1 progression is the strongest tension resolution that exists in our Western pop music. It's a progression or a note or a chord wanting to move to another chord 2.5 tones or 5 frets up. Now it doesn't matter which type of chords you're using. Whenever you have this sequence of chords which has that root motion of 5 frets up or 7 frets down, which is the same, you'll end up with a strong chord progression. The 5-1 resolution clearly defines the key that you're in. Kind of makes a big exclamation mark to signal this is what we're talking about. So G to C is strong, G7 to C major 7 is strong, but G7 to C minor is also strong, and G minor to C minor, same thing. The G to C remains the root motion, and because of that, the chord sequence is a relatively strong one. But of course there's a difference in amount of strength in the amount of tension resolution that you'll be getting with these chord progressions. A G to a C is strong, but a G7 to a C is stronger. Now this is the result of the tritone interval in the G7 chord. It has the notes B and F, and then when they're played together they form this interval, which creates a lot of tension. That tension is resolved on the C chord. Now a G minor to a C is strong, but a G major to a C is stronger. Now this is the result of having the guide tone B in the G major chord. That B note really wants to resolve up to the root of the C major chord. Now as we said earlier, we've got 6 chords to work with, plus their 4, 5, and 6 note brothers in a major key. If we look at the roots of these chords, we find that there is more than one 5-1 progression possible. The 5th degree chord to the 1st degree chord, so G to C, is not the only one that goes 2.5 notes up. Going up from the 2nd to the 5th degree chords will also give you that root movement. So in C major, that would be D minor, which is the 2 chord, to the G major, which is the 5 chord. The root motion, D to G. D goes up 5 frets to get to G. The same with the 3rd degree chord, E minor, which has a 5-1 relationship with the 6th degree chord, A minor. And the 6th degree chord, A minor, wants to resolve to the 2nd degree chord, D minor, because the roots move 2.5 notes up. If you use these chords in a 5-1 progression, they are called secondary dominants. The 5 chord is the dominant chord within the major key. The others can be used as a temporary dominant to another chord within the same key, a chord that has a 5-1 function. That temporary 5 chord is called a secondary dominant. These three 5-1 chord sequences, so 2 to 5, 3 to 6, and 6 to 2, so D minor to G, E minor to A minor, and A minor to D minor, all these three chord sequences start with a minor chord, or a minor 7th if you would want to make it into a 4-note chord. Now because of this, their tension resolution characteristic is a bit weaker than the 5-1 chord sequence originally in the scale, going from the 5th degree chord to the 1st degree chord. As a songwriter, you can alter the chords you work with in any way you like. So when you're looking for a strong movement in your chord progression, going from one chord to the other, a 5-1 progression where the secondary dominant chord is major would be a good choice. In a major key, this would mean altering the polarity, as some would call this, of the minor chord on the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degree. So in C major, those chords would be the D minor, the E minor, and A minor. You can change one of these chords, or all of them, from minor to major. So instead of playing a D minor to a G chord progression, you would be using a D major to a G. The F note of the D minor chord would be raised to an F sharp, which would result in a temporary guide tone to the G note, which is the root of the chord you're going to. Now, same thing with the E minor to the A minor progression. It would become an E major to an A minor. The minor third of the E minor chord as a G note, which would change into a G sharp. And this G sharp note is only a half note beneath the root of the A minor chord. It wants to resolve up. And the A minor chord on the 6th degree has a C note as its flatted third. Raise it to a C sharp to become the major third of the A major chord. Now this C sharp wants to resolve up to the D note root of the D minor chord on the 2nd degree. So D minor to G becomes D major to G, E minor to A minor becomes E major to A minor, and A minor to D minor becomes A major to D minor. Now, because these secondary dominant chords use notes that are outside of the original C major key, they will create some tension. These chords are foreign to the original key, but we can add them to guide the listener's ear. Let's say you came up with this progression: 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm playing a C to an A minor, to a D minor, to a G. Now the A minor is a 2nd degree chord which has a 5-1 relationship to the D minor chord. If you want to give it an edge, change it into an A major chord, which would result in this: 1, 2, 3, 4. The D minor to the G has the same characteristic 5-1 root movement. The chord progression could become the following: 1, 2, 3, 4. C, A minor, D major to D to G, and back to C. Now the D to G chord sequence propels the progression forward and makes the resolution to the C major chord very satisfying. Without changing the tempo of the song or the number of chords per bar, you're kind of speeding up the feel of this section of your song. And you could, of course, really go to town by making both minor chords major, which would give you this progression. 1, 2, 3, 4. Four major chords in a row: C, A major, D major, and G, of which only 2 belong to the original key. This changing of polarity of the minor chords of a major key to major chords has consequences for the melody notes you can use on top of those altered chords. If your original melody on the D minor chord held an F note, this would now sound off on the D major chord. You would change it to an F sharp, which is the major third of that chord. Now, we've seen that before. Often a songwriter will incorporate this specific note and let it stand out in the melody. By doing this, you would accent the altered chord change. It becomes the go-to note. If your melody doesn't have an F note, then you have no clashes. You can change the backing chord to a D, D major, which will create a strong tension resolution. Although the listener will feel it, the melody note does not attract attention to it. Anytime you change the polarity of a chord, you will have to take the melody into account. The easiest way to do it is to look at the shape of the chord that you are playing. The chord notes are right beneath your fingers, and any clashes with the melody will be clearly audible once you sing, whistle, or hum the melody. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's clear that we're in the key of G, with its chords G, A minor, B minor, C major, D, and E minor. But instead of playing an A minor in the background, we're using an A major. We've switched polarity of the second degree chord from minor to major. We could resolve this tension by moving to a D chord, which would give you A major to D major. There's a 5-1 sequence from the second degree chord in G major to the 5th degree chord. But as you can hear, the A major chord hangs around for a whole bar and then moves to a C major, which is the 4th degree chord in G major. These secondary dominants do not have to resolve in a 5-1 type of progression. Our ear has heard these types of changes so often that this, as you could call it, very short modulation to a different key sounds surprising, but doesn't come as a shock. You can introduce these altered polarity chords in any part of your progression without having to move in a 5-1 chord sequence. Now, the A major chord has a C sharp note in it. It's the major third. The chord progression moves to a C major chord in our example, which makes for a really smooth way back into the original key. To further enhance the dominant character of the secondary dominant chord, you can make that major chord, or which was originally a minor chord in the key, into a dominant 7th chord. So in our song, the A major, stemming from the A minor, would become an A 7th. By doing this, you don't add a note that's foreign to the key. The flatted 7th is a G note, the tonic of the G major scale. But by doing this, the chord now incorporates a tritone interval, the distance between the major third, C sharp, and the flatted 7th, G. That's a tritone right there. This interval holds tension and will want to resolve, in this case, to the D. The dominant function of this chord is strengthened. It actually becomes more difficult not to go to the intended resolution, which in this case is a temporary 1 chord D, the 5 chord in the original key.